I still remember every detail of the day the world ended. The war with the humans had been the longest and most brutal we had ever fought. By the time it was over, our fleets were nearly annihilated and half our colonies lay in ruins. But on our homeworld, TYS, the fighting had always been distant. A conflict waged across the stars, far beyond the horizon. We saw the trade ships dwindle, the messages of condolence increase, but we carried on as we always had. We were a martial people, and war was our way of life. The thought of losing never crossed our minds. True, the signs were there. Trade from the outer colonies slowed until entire docking bays stood empty. Grieving families became a common sight, each mourning a loved one lost at the front. But we had always prevailed before. When faced with adversity, we struck back harder. Defeat was unthinkable, and surrender was beyond comprehension. So when the government announced that we had lost and would surrender to the humans, the world stood still. At first, we thought it was a mistake, a miscommunication, or enemy sabotage. But as the confirmations kept coming, denial turned to shock and then to despair. The following day was surreal. The streets were filled with people wandering aimlessly, their eyes hollow with disbelief. Businesses shut down, schools closed, and the world seemed to hold its breath. Our leaders had failed us. For the first time in history, we had been broken. Some citizens protested, demanding that the fight continue, but the government had already ensured that any serious resistance was quickly silenced. The rest of us could only watch and wait for the humans to arrive. 1 month later, the sky darkened with the arrival of the human fleet. Their ships weren't larger than ours, but there were many, too many. More than double the number our largest fleet had commanded at the war's beginning. And these were only the forces sent to occupy TYS. Now, at last, we understood why we had lost. The official surrender took place aboard the human flagship, broadcast live across the planet. We expected to see our leaders humiliated, forced to kneel and beg for mercy. Instead, they simply signed a document, a parchment of all things, a strange alien custom. Then they spoke a brief oath of loyalty, and it was over. No executions, no punishments. The humans had no interest in theatrics. They simply moved forward. Then the occupation began. We had all heard the stories of how the humans treated those they conquered. Mass executions, forced labor, and unspeakable horrors. Some chose to end their own lives rather than face what was to come. But when the human troops landed, they did not storm to the streets killing at random. Instead, they moved with precision and order, taking control of government buildings and key infrastructure. I watched from my apartment window, expecting at any moment to see the brutality we had been warned about. But what I saw defied everything I had been taught. A small child wandered into the path of the human soldiers, so tiny and fragile before their massive armored forms. I braced for the worst. Instead, one soldier stepped forward, carefully lifted the child, and carried her back to safety. He even gave her something, food. Then he rejoined the ranks without another word. I couldn't understand it. Weren't these supposed to be monsters? Weren't they here to crush us beneath their boots? And yet, in that moment, I saw something I had never considered before. Perhaps we had been wrong. The occupation settled in. I kept my job, reporting to work under new human oversight. When I was summoned to a meeting with my new supervisor, I feared the worst. But instead of threats or punishments, I was given a lecture on new formatting guidelines and document standardization. The human in charge, a man named Doug, was amiable, even considerate. He treated us with more respect than many of our own superiors had. As the weeks passed, there were no mass purges, no forced labor camps, no atrocities. There were arrests, yes, but only for those who had committed war crimes. There was order, but not oppression. As time went on, I began to understand the truth that had been right in front of me all along. The war had been pointless. Millions had died for nothing more than our own arrogance. We had believed ourselves the greatest power in the galaxy, and we had paid dearly for that mistake. The humans had not come to exterminate us. They had not come to enslave us. They had come to bring order, to rebuild. It was a hard truth to accept, but it was undeniable. The day we surrendered should have been the end. Instead, it was a beginning. The old TYS was gone, but in its place, something new could grow. And maybe, just maybe, with the humans' help, it would be something better.